Chris Carter here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Joined today by Brian Batko. We're going to look at whether or not the Steelers are actually contenders, taking a close look at that Thursday night football team between the Bengals and the Ravens, as well as the Steelers' moves at the trade deadline to reassess and say, hey, is this team capable of making a run for the division and maybe being a serious playoff threat? We'll talk about that, give you our pick six on the games of the weekend, and our final predictions on Steelers Commanders, all headed into this weekend in an action-packed episode of the North Shore Drive podcast. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter. As always, bringing you the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as all of our daily content from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, including Chipped Ham and Football on Tuesdays with today's guest, Brian Batko, one of our great Steelers beat writers here in the Post-Gazette. And as always, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Whether you're injured in a car accident or hurt on the job, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped injury victims over 40 years recover more than $2 billion on their behalf. If you or a loved one have been seriously injured in an accident, call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Brian, the Steelers have made two moves at the deadline. We talked about that with Ray Fittipaldo on Wednesday, and they've added a piece on offense and a piece on defense. Meanwhile, they still are a team that is looking at being in control of the AFC North. Last night, the Ravens took down the Bengals in dramatic fashion. It was the Bengals almost pulled it out. They had a big lead, and they had a chance to win with a 2-point conversion at the end of the game. And now as things sit going into the weekend, the Steelers still technically have they still technically have first place because of the tiebreakers. And I don't know how 6-2 versus 7-3 works, but are the Steelers contenders right now as they stand? Or do you think that things are about to change as they now start to play all the AFC North teams in the second half of the season?
Yeah, I think I still need to see a little bit more. In my mailbag on Thursday, Chris, somebody asked me kind of the same questions, like, this person was saying he and his friends, they feel as confident about the Steelers as they've felt in a long time. But what exactly does that mean? Does that mean they think they're going to, win the AFC North, get the 2 seed, get a home playoff game, maybe even 2 of them, challenge the Chiefs in the AFC Championship? Or does it just mean, hey, they're in better position to win a playoff game finally for the first time since, 2017? So, it's hard to say, I think, still, with having only seen 2 games of this offense with Russell Wilson at the helm. It feels somewhere between 2-0 and 6-2, because a lot of what we could take away from the 4-2 start with Justin Fields is still applicable to the second half of the season. But so much of it has changed by switching the quarterbacks on the other side of the ball that I'm cautiously optimistic about that. I think they did it against a couple of defenses that are better than the ones that played last night, by and large. Although, the Jets and Giants could certainly go in the tank as this season progresses if they're out of it. And, maybe the Ravens and Bengals will get guys back and play better. But, it has been sort of a weird couple of weeks now with the bye and just watching the rest of the league and still trying to figure out where the Steelers fit in. Ultimately, in my mailbag, I put them in the second tier below, or in the third tier, actually. I have the Chiefs alone in the first, because till we see otherwise, what else are you going to do with the only undefeated team that's won back-to-back Super Bowls? And then I had the Bills and the Ravens in the next one. And then I had the Steelers with the Texans in the third tier. And, I think they could jump up or they could fall below if they can't keep pace with this grueling schedule ahead.
I think that's the thing, is that the schedule is what everyone's looking at, but I'm also looking at how the schedule does it. I don't think it looks as nasty as it did when we looked at it at the start of the season. Look,
some people think it could be more nasty. It's all in the eye of the beholder.
I guess so, because the Commanders are certainly harder,
Right.
than a tougher task this week, and we'll get into that later in the show. The Ravens are kind of what I expected. I honestly thought their defense would be a lot better than they have been. But their offense is why I picked them to be. They were my AFC favorite to go to the Super Bowl this year. In our preseason preview stuff. But the Browns look like a joke. The Bengals, their offense, does what their offense does, but their defense looks even worse than the Ravens defense. And that was, to me, the bulk of the schedule, was that the Ohio teams were going to potentially give the Steelers a really rough run for their money. And then if they didn't come out of that at least 500, that could really put them behind the 8 ball. But now it's in the position where I think the Steelers 500 might be the low ball of what they should expect to get through those Ohio teams. And look, division games are always division games. They're gonna, teams play it tough when they know you well.
But the Steelers lost to Dorian Thompson-Robinson in Cleveland last year, so weird, wonky things can happen.
And that's what got Matt Canada fired. And Kenny Pickett was benched. Well, he got hurt soon after that, but he didn't turn. He played like 1 or 2 more games after that. And I think this is a completely different offense. And I don't know if Jameis Winston throwing 3 interceptions is going to be the thing that gets the Browns over the top against the Steelers later this season. But all that being said, I look at the Steelers additions. I look at the state of the AFC North. And I like the way you tiered things in the AFC, because I agree with you. Until the Chiefs lose, I don't know how you could pick against them. They are playing a completely different style of football and still dominant in doing so.
Yeah, they can beat you any way you want them to. Really, it's impressive.
And it's masterful. It's awesome. I feel foolish for not making them my Super Bowl favorite again, but I wanted to go against the chalk there a little bit. But you're right about the Ravens and the Bills being in that. But Brian, what would you need to see from the Steelers to put them in that second tier of teams category? I mean, they're not going to get into the first tier unless they win out, and that winning out, of course, involves beating the Chiefs. But what do you need to see from them to get to that second tier you talked about?
Yeah, I mean, continue to do what they've been doing these last few games, but against better opponents. If they take care of business on the road against Washington, albeit as underdogs this week, and we'll get into our predictions later, but I don't necessarily view them as underdogs in this game. And then, the much anticipated, long awaited, finally the can opener, the lid lifter of the AFC North schedule a week after that, with Baltimore coming here. That'll be a really good measuring stick game for them. So yeah, I mean, if this offense continues to show that not only were the last couple of weeks with Russell Wilson not a mirage, but they're actually going to be even better, infusing Mike Williams and getting healthier on the O-line, and with Cordero Patterson potentially coming back and providing another piece to utilize, then yeah, I could probably talk myself into putting them there. But the biggest thing above all of that is just Russell Wilson himself, because I still think at the end of the day, we talk so much about the rest of the roster and the other moves they made. Reinforcements are good at receiver and edge rusher, and Zach Frazier getting healthy is good, and the defense playing out of its mind is good. But you still need that quarterback, I think, to really feel like you can keep pace with the Mahomeses and Allens. And Lamar Jackson hasn't had the playoff success, but you just watch him last night, and what he's been doing so far this season feels like that's only a matter of time. So I still want to mainly see that Russell Wilson can still be in that territory and still be one of those guys that you think you can go all the way as long as he's under center for you.
Yeah, I feel you. And what's funny is that like it feels like the only person who really has playoff success is Patrick Mahomes. Josh Allen hasn't been to a Super Bowl. Joe Burrow's been to 1 Super Bowl, but I feel like they've had 2 good years, and they're in the middle of their 3rd not good year, and it's kind of been a mixed bag for the Bengals in his era. And I think that's a unique opportunity for the Steelers in this season, in that if Russell Wilson can get hot with the Steelers, and not even get hot, just play at the level that they're expecting the veteran quarterback to play, and establish this balanced attack, and the defense doesn't sustain major injuries, and they can ramp up their production because they're already the number 2 scoring defense in the NFL. If those things can combine, I do think that makes them a contender. But like you said, they have to do it in the games that aren't just against teams like the Jets and the Giants and the Raiders. They got to do it against teams, like the Commanders, like the Ravens, like the Chargers, who I think are a good team right now, and like the Falcons, who I think are playing a good team. And they were able to beat them, albeit with different methods. But now is the time. You're in the second half of the season. You're getting healthier again after the bye week. Let's see if they can show that they're actually making progress as a team and moving forward. And if they are, I like their chances to be a serious contender in the AFC in the second half.
It's a lot about the team, but for me, Chris, it's also a lot about the guy wearing number 3. I think at some point in this conference, especially, it's always a different conversation if they'd be over in the NFC, where there are more well-rounded teams. I think more, kind of loaded rosters from top to bottom than the guys who can take over a game. I think in the AFC specifically, and we've seen this in recent playoff matchups with the Bills and the Chiefs, I think you're going to need to show at some point that you can win a game because of Russell Wilson and not just having him in there sort of as a game manager who's, not losing you games. I think in the postseason in the AFC, there's going to come a time where you need to win it because of your quarterback. And I think the first couple games have been fairly encouraging. If he gets healthier, continues to click with the guys around him, maybe he'll put himself in that discussion.
Maybe. We will see what happens there. We'll get back to the Steelers and their matchup with the Commanders and what they have to do to win that game. But next up, we got our pick 6. There's a whole bunch of action still this weekend outside of Steelers Commanders. We'll get to those and get you our predictions of those next here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko. But first, I want to remind you the show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. If you're injured in an accident, you're probably wondering what's next. Well, for over 40 years, Edgar Snyder Associates have helped injury victims answer that very what's next question. Whether it's gathering evidence, collecting medical records, or dealing with insurance companies, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped over 75,000 people handle the what's next question. Call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. Remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. We're back here in the North Shore Drive podcast on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko. Brian, let's talk about our pick 6 this weekend. We pick 6 games from the NFL slate that do not involve the Steelers.
I think I did terrible last week, Chris. I think I took way too many underdogs and put myself out there with too many upsets.
You did. It's a good thing we do not keep track of what we do in this thing, because otherwise, I think both of us would have some really rough weeks.
But but also it's like, what do people want? You just want me to just agree with Chris every time? Like, no. Sometimes you got to spice it up.
I do. Puts less pressure on me every week. Because then I'm thinking like, oh, Brian picked that one up.
We were talking off there that it's kind of a rough slate of games. That doesn't mean we aren't going to get exciting finishes, but on paper, it was difficult to pick 6 games, honestly, that get our juices flowing.
They get the juices flowing. The juices are flowing. Real quick, Thursday Night Football, your thoughts on just how that played out? I know we alluded to it a little bit, but just the Ravens eking out the Bengals yet again. I feel like it's a heartbreaker for Bengals fans because they were this close and they put up a ton of points against them. Just wasn't enough.
I've referenced my Yahoo Pick'em League before, Chris, and I'm really mad because I was going back and forth on that game. And that's against the spread. And I finally decided, like yesterday afternoon while we were going to eat lunch, that I was going to take the points with the Bengals, even though the Ravens might win. And then I forgot to lock it in before 8:15. So I lost that anyway. But yeah, I mean, that was a really fun game to watch. It kind of was what I expected. Wasn't necessarily sure by the end there which way it was going to go. But that kind of goes back to what I was saying in the previous segment. I think, you can go far with defense and a quarterback who's taking care of the ball and a strong running game. But it feels like it's been a while since we've seen a team go all the way with that identity because it's just so hard to play defense in the NFL against some of the incredibly talented offensive players who are out there, whether it's Lamar Jackson, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, Derrick Henry. The Steelers have their guys, Najee Harris and George Pickens, but as what did Mike Tomlin say Wednesday? It's an arms race in the NFL. So that game was, use another metaphor, I guess. I mean, that was a shootout for sure. It was enjoyable to watch.
Certainly was. Let's get to some of the games this weekend still that could be exciting. We'll go Bills at Colts, a team that's beaten the Steelers, and the Colts, a team that's favored to do well in the AFC. And the Bills are 3.5-point favorites on the road in this game. I'm going with Buffalo, Brian. I think that the Colts have some tricks up their sleeves. I just don't think it's enough to outmatch the firepower the Bills are finding right now.
I picked the Colts last Sunday night against the Vikings on the road.
What are you thinking?
That was dumb. They stunk up the joint. I'm going the Bills here, and I don't think it's very close.
Yeah, what were you thinking?
Josh Allen in a dome. He always cooks, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. Broncos at Chiefs. Chiefs 7.5-point favorites at home. Let's do this. I think we could both agree the Chiefs are going to win this game, at least in our outlook here. Let's pick with the spread here because that's what you do in your pick'em league. I'm going to take the Broncos to cover a 7.5-point spread. This team, the Broncos played them tough last year. I think they can play them tough this year. I also think the Chiefs aren't a team that's been running up the score on too many teams. I think the Broncos can be annoying just enough in this game to make this a 4-point loss for them. It'll still be a loss, and the Chiefs will still be undefeated. But I think they can cover a 7.5-point spread. What say you?
Chiefs are rolling right now. A lot of momentum from that game the other night. DeAndre Hopkins cementing himself as yet another piece of that potent offense. I think the Chiefs win. I think they'd cover a 10-point spread. Bo Nix walking into Arrowhead as a rookie. They're going to have that dude in the pressure cooker. So no, I think it's going to be a rough outing for Bo Nix in Denver.
Niners at Buccaneers. The Niners are road favorites of 6.5 points. Listen, I know the Buccaneers are hurt up. Their receivers are gone and everything, but they took the Chiefs to the mat last week. And I was impressed. And I'm taking the Bucs to pull off an upset. Now, I do know Christian McCaffrey's back this week, and that changes a lot of things for the Niners. But the Niners have not impressed me. They've been wildly inconsistent. I think the Buccaneers, it'll be a close one. It'll be a weird one. But I think the Buccaneers and Baker Mayfield find a way to do it. They continue to impress me by how they have not allowed this season to just fall apart despite all of the things that they've gone against them this year.
All right. So, Chris, you're falling on the underdog grenade this week instead of me. I'm not gonna vibe with you on this one. Niners coming off the bye week. They should be as healthy as they've been all season, including their star running back. Yeah, they've got to make the cross-country trip. That always sort of worries you, but I think they win this game straight up in Tampa, and I actually think they cover 5.5, 6.5, whatever it's been. I think it's a fairly comfortable win against a Bucs team that Baker Mayfield throwing a Sterling Shepard and Trey Palmer, Raheem Jarrett. That Cade Otton, I guess.
I was going to say, don't you disrespect Cade Otton. He's on my fantasy teams.
Yeah, no, I like the Niners here and not too close.
Jets at Cardinals. Jets are 1.5-point favorites in this one. Brian, I've been all over the place with the Cardinals, but last week when the Jets finally won with Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers, the national media threw a parade as if they were back in the Super Bowl hunt. And I'm sorry, I don't buy into them that much. I think the Cardinals are doing some interesting things with James Conner on the ground, Marvin Harrison Jr. in the air. Kyler Murray can still get things going. I think that they find a way to win this at home with the East Coast traveling to the West Coast here. Do you think I'm doubting Aaron Rodgers too much in this one?
The betting line on this game has been kind of all over the place too, because I think the Jets were underdogs at one point, and yeah, like you said, now they're favorites, right? So I am going to go with the favorites. I'm going to take Aaron Rodgers on the road. Feel like maybe they've got some kind of stew going after beating the Texans. Mike Williams is gone. I think they'd mostly patch things up between him and Rodgers, but they've got a little bit more clearly defined roles. They can kind of excitedly work in one of those younger receivers if they want to. Maybe Malachi Corley shouldn't be that guy, considering he can't even hold the ball across the goal line. But I think the Jets go to Arizona. Aaron Rodgers puts the ball where he wants to. Close game, back and forth, but maybe the Jets win it by a field goal.
Eagles at Cowboys, a big rivalry game, but the Eagles are 7-point favorites. They've been playing well, and the Cowboys are hurt up. And I think let's do this. Let's do this with the spread way again, because I think we can both agree the Eagles are going to win this game. I'm taking the Eagles and the points. I don't care what anybody says. Philly's about to dog Dallas to no end. That if there are two franchises that love each other's misery as much as anything else outside of Steelers, Browns, Steelers, Ravens, Bengals, and all those teams, it's these two teams. I went to Chain University, the first HBCU out in the Philadelphia area, and whenever the Eagles, whenever the Eagles played the Cowboys, I had to find wherever like the epicenter of where the fans on campus were going to be watching and just watch the vitriol fly, because it was just, I love the hatred in this rivalry. And I'm going to love watching Eagles fans just make the Cowboys fans cry. They're going to be evil. They're going to be mean. All the yo mama jokes is going to be crazy. I'm taking the Eagles winning big.
Cooper Rush went on that nice little run 2 or 3 years ago when Dak went down. I kind of feel like he's going to be somewhat frisky, but I think it's going to be more of just like maybe they go down and score an opening drive touchdown against the Eagles. Not going to be able to keep up the whole way. I'm with you, Chris. I think the Eagles win this one, and it's probably by double digits down there in Dallas. Even if Micah Parsons is back, even if CeeDee Lamb is back, I don't think Cooper Rush is going to be able to hang for 4 quarters, even if he shows some signs of life early. And I think by the time Dak Prescott is back from IR, they're going to be in a state where you might as well see what Trey Lance has, right? I know it was awful in the preseason, but like, what good does it do you to keep running out Cooper Rush other than to try to scratch together some wins? At some point, just see if Trey Lance has anything left in there. And it's interesting, too, that the Bengals do get the Cowboys in 5 weeks. So they might not see Dak Prescott. That should be an easy win for them, and they would need it in the AFC North/AFC wildcard hunt.
They certainly would. Let's get to what I think is the game of the week this week. Sunday Night Football. The Detroit Lions visit the Houston Texans. The Lions 3.5-point road favorites in this one. Brian, I like both of these teams. I like what they've been able to put together, but I'm taking Detroit. They were my Super Bowl pick to win it all at the start of the season. They're still my Super Bowl pick now, even without Aiden Hutchinson. They went and added Zadarius Smith from the Browns to replace him. The offense is still highly efficient. They're getting it done. I think the Texans will give them a hard time, but I think the Lions find a way to win this one.
I picked against the Lions last week too, and you know what? I'm going to do it again, even though the Texans don't have any wide receivers. I mean, I guess maybe Nico Collins is coming back, and I use the lack of skill position guys to pick against some of these other teams. But Houston's at home. This feels like a CJ Stroud night to kind of re-announce himself to the league. And the Lions it's going to be weird to say, they've been such a juggernaut. They've been playing so well that I feel like one of these weeks it needs to regress a little bit. Something has to go wrong. So I'll say this is the week, and the Texans win a very, very close one, holding serve at home, but I don't feel great about that one. I'll probably be regretting it on next week's show.
See, you picking again. It's so cold in the D, Brian. Why are you doing this to yourself?
I know I picked the Packers to beat them last week. Yeah, that didn't go very well.
For shame, Doc. Well, we got to get the Steelers Commanders. We'll see where Brian picks on that one. We'll talk about all those different advantages and the way the Steelers need to go at this game next here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But first, we remind you the show is also brought to you by Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. They're your mesothelioma and his bestest lawyers with over 85 years of experience. Call them today for a free consultation. That's Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. We're also brought to you by Moon Township Honda, where you can get your new Honda vehicle at 5802 University Boulevard in Moon Township or at moonhonda.com. Here's a message from our friends at Moon Township Honda.
To build the Honda CR-V Hybrid, we took everything you love about the CR-V and kicked it up a notch with greater power for a CR-V unlike any before. Adventure confidently with Honda, Car and Driver's most awarded brand in 10 Best history. The CR-V and CR-V Hybrid, part of the Honda line of rugged vehicles. Visit your local Honda dealer where new vehicles are arriving daily. Buy online or reserve from select Honda dealers.
Hello, welcome back to the North Shore Drive podcast of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko. Brian, we talked about all these other games in the NFL. Let's talk about the Steelers-Commanders game.
What we didn't talk about, though, Chris, real quick. We've mentioned that Thursday night classic, Ravens-Bengals, in the first two segments, but we didn't touch on Deontay Johnson
Oh,
not
that's
getting a
point.
touch for the Ravens. Doesn't mean he didn't get targets, but he's just.
He did get two. He did get 2 touches.
Oh, he did. Did he get 2 catches?
Oh, he got 2 catches. Well, no,
Oh,
I think
that's
he got
right. The
one.
one I forgot about because he didn't get out of bounds.
It was the end of the first half, and of all people who tackled him in open space to keep him from getting to the sideline, Mike Hilton flew in and brought him down. And then there was another time they targeted him, and he was wide open for a first down, and he just slipped in open space, and the ball just fell right down in front of him. And I was like, oh man,
Deontay. Yeah, he did get 1 touch on 2 targets. Neither target was very helpful for the Ravens, considering there was that one, and then the Justin Tucker probably would have missed. But then there was the second one that Lamar did one of his several Lamar magician plays, scrambled around, bought time, extended the play, and Deontay Johnson could have found open grass. Instead, he slipped, and Lamar was none too happy when his pass sailed incomplete. So, yeah, through 2 weeks, the Deontay Johnson addition has not really been providing a lot of value for the Ravens. We'll see what happens down the stretch, because the next game where he'll have a chance to get involved is back in Pittsburgh, and I don't think he'll be received very warmly. We can talk about that next week.
We can talk about that next week. Let's talk about this week. The Steelers play the Commanders. The Commanders are one of the best offenses in the NFL this week. They're also 2.5-point home favorites right now over the Steelers. That line's been moving all around. It's been 2.5 to 3 to 2. They've been moving it back and forth. The over-under moved a little bit down when they added Marshawn Lattimore, but now there's a question as far as will he even play in this game, because they traded for an injured guy. But again, this Commanders team, they're 29.2 points per game, third best in the NFL. Crazy enough, you think about Jayden Daniels, it's their run game that's really impressive too. They average 163.9 yards on the ground. That's third best in the NFL. So they've been able to do that really well. Brian, what are the biggest things that the Steelers have to do to make sure that they get a win this week, especially when it comes to defense and taking the air out of that offense?
Yeah, I think trying to keep Jayden Daniels in the pocket is a big one. You let him escape and throw on the move or scramble and keep the chains moving with his legs, then I think you could be in trouble. The Steelers secondary, I think, is overall playing pretty well, but we've seen some of the lapses. We've seen some of the missed assignments. If you don't plaster those guys as he's buying time for himself, then Terry McLaurin or Noah Brown or De'Ami Brown or any of these guys, Olamide Zaccheaus, any of them can kind of get loose and hit you for a chunk play. So that to me is the big one. But with every game, especially given the stats you just rattled off, you got to try to stop the run, because good running game is any quarterback's best friend, especially a rookie who's going to face probably the best defense he's seen to this point, an experienced one, a head coach who, other than a couple of the guys we just mentioned, Dorian Thompson-Robinson and C.J. Stroud, always beats rookie quarterbacks. So, yeah, those to me are the big keys to trying to stop this Commanders offense that's been really, really lethal thus far.
It has been really lethal. It's been a factor here. Let me ask you this. We talk about how the Steelers, they need to beat somebody impressive. But I look at the Commanders schedule and I think, well, wait a second. Who have they beaten this year? Now, they have beaten the Cardinals and they beat them soundly, and I think that's their best win so far. But they've swept the Giants. They've beaten the Bengals, who I don't think are a good team right now. They've beaten the Browns, who definitely aren't a good team, the Panthers, and the Bears. So I look at those teams and I think, man, this is also their big chance to show that they're a for real team. And I think that's a unique position for both of these teams to be in, despite leading their divisions, despite being 2 lost teams at week 10. And I think that's an underrated part of this matchup that's coming in here, and that both these teams have new factors, new quarterbacks, and despite their success, I think are being doubted that they can be serious factors in the second half of the season in the NFL.
Yeah, I'd give them a little more credit for beating the Bengals than you, Chris. I still think the Bengals they're not an easy win by any stretch. Yeah, their defense is weak, and Jayden Daniels whooped on them on that Monday Night Football game in Cincy. But we're since seeing just how good Jayden Daniels is. Nearly beating the Ravens on the road too is nothing to scoff at, especially for a a young guy who was going to have some ups and downs, but there haven't been many downs for him. And I think this is a spot where it could be. You're right, Chris. I mean, they've played a soft schedule lately for sure. We know the Giants defense is probably better than people give it credit for when they just look at that overall team. The Bears are better defensively than they are offensively right now. But yeah, they haven't really faced a well-rounded team other than the Ravens. So, the Cardinals, I'm not totally buying them, as evidenced by me picking the Jets last segment. But yeah, I mean, this is a really fun game this week in the NFL. And it's interesting too. I mean, it's two teams who don't normally play, haven't seen each other since that 2020 matchup where the two of the main characters were Anthony McFarland and Matthew Wright. Go figure. And, that's where the Steelers 11-0 start to the season came crashing down at home against the Washington Football Club or whatever they were called in that game. So, yeah, I mean, this is big for both teams. The Steelers, they lose this one, then all of a sudden, you probably have some concerns that you're going to be worried about next week facing the Ravens. If you win this one, you've got even more margin for error coming down the stretch here in this divisional race. I think it was, kind of a setback for the Steelers that the Bengals couldn't pull that one off against the Ravens. But yeah, I mean, this is a game that if you'd asked me when the schedule came out, are you looking forward to Steelers Commanders out of the bye week? I'd have probably been like, not really. It'll just be another appetizer for that stretch run. But now it's one of the best games of this stretch run.
I think it's going to be certainly a lot of fun to watch, a really interesting matchup. Let's get into our predictions here. Brian, what's the X factor to this game, and how do you see it playing out?
Yeah, I mean, building off of what I said before, I think, trying to stop Jayden Daniels or contain him or limit him also just comes down to the marquee players, Cam Hayward, TJ Watt on the other side of the ball, and then Russell Wilson. It's always kind of an individual matchup between the quarterbacks and, how they outduel each other. And, there's different ways to do it. Maybe it'll just be keeping the Steelers offense on schedule, whereas Jayden Daniels is, trying to make the big play. He hasn't turned it over yet. I think at some point, statistically you're due, especially against the Steelers team that is so good at taking the ball away. So I'll go out on a limb. Bold prediction. I think Jayden Daniels might have his worst game as a pro to this point against the Steelers defense that is rested, that does have vets at every level, that has kind of seen it all, and they see a quarterback like Daniels. I know he doesn't like the comparisons to Lamar Jackson, but the Steelers do play Lamar well year in and year out for the most part. So they kind of will be prepped to some degree for what they're about to see just in terms of play style. I'm going to go Steelers 20, Commanders 14. So not a resounding win, but yeah, I think they frustrate Daniels a lot, turn him over 2 or 3 times, which he hasn't done. And, Russell Wilson in the offense, they'll do enough to get out of that stadium with a win.
I think this is a game where the Steelers defense, like you said, has had a couple weeks rest. They've been able to rebound. They've gotten some guys back. They added a person that's going to help with their depth. And I think that they're going to – I think in the second half of the season, we're going to see some different looks than we did not see from the Steelers defense in the first half as much. I think it's still going to not manifest completely in this first game back. But, one thing that Mike Tomlin talked about, one thing that Terrell Austin talked about was how in the first half of the season, they were kind of limited with certain blitz packages and pass rush schemes that they were using because of the injuries at outside linebacker and what they could do there. Now all those guys are healthy. And now you've also added to that position where you got 4 guys that I think you could confidently put in and say, these are good NFL players who can go out and make the plays. If those 4 guys stay healthy, and if the interior guys are healthy, I think you're going to see more diverse looks. I think it's going to force more quarterbacks like Jayden Daniels to have to make more checks at the line of scrimmage, more communication, and that's going to lead to more mistakes. And I think this is the first week we see that. And like you, I think the defense plays a big factor in this game. I have the Steelers winning this one, let's say 27-20 Steelers winning. It's still a single possession game, but Russell Wilson doing enough to get the offense going early. The defense capitalizes on some big plays, and they find a way to win by holding Jayden Daniels back from pulling off a comeback.
Yeah, I think it'll be kind of a classic Steelers recipe. They won't turn it over. The offense might look a little uninspired at times, maybe a few more punts mixed in there than you'd want to see. But yeah, I think for the most part, they're going to prioritize the time of possession, trying to run the ball, keeping it safe, and they'll do that. The Commanders won't, and the Steelers will find themselves on top in the end and be sitting here at 7-2, which, impressive, but also I think I may have predicted that going into the season, just looking at the teams that they had. Then the going gets tough, or as Terrell Austin said, it's going to get tight and crunchy down here in the second half of the season. He was talking about the red zone. I'm going to apply that to the schedule.
But I hear you on that. I think it is going to get tight and crunchy. Like my lunch is going to be in a little bit here after we're done filming. Brian, thanks so much for joining us here on the North Shore Drive podcast on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. As always, you can find this show every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on your favorite podcasting app and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our daily content that comes out from our writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Stay tuned because we will have stuff all throughout the weekend, including Brian and our guys at the stadium in Washington, D.C., taking it in. I'll be here in Pittsburgh covering Pitt basketball Friday night, Pitt football Saturday night, and then Pitt basketball again Monday night. So it's 4 straight days of major sports here in Pittsburgh. So stay tuned for all of it here on the North Shore Drive podcast on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.